Welcome to the Databricks Skill Builder series. We're glad you're here.
Okay, so today we're going to spend very little time in a presentation, but I figured I'd give you some structure and then we'll jump into the actual demo. So today we're going to be talking about connecting Databricks and Airflow. So what is Airflow? Airflow is an open source platform for developing your batch-oriented workflows. So you scheduled your directed acyclic graphs on Airflow, and today we're going to see how you direct those to run on Databricks. Before diving in, there's many options on both platforms in terms of versions and clouds and capabilities, but just for the sake of grounding us on one version, we're running on the latest stable version of both Airflow, which is 2.5.1, and the long-term support version for Databricks, which is the latest one, which is 11.3. So when we talk about options for running code on the Databricks side, there's many. So we have workflows, and the workflow can be composed of one or many job tasks, where each job task can be a notebook or packaged code, so a jar, wheel, etc. It can be a Python file, it could be a Delta Life table pipeline, which in its own contains, it can contain many tables inside too. And a workflow, as I mentioned, can have one or multiple of these tasks. So from the Airflow side, what you do is you run these workflows on Databricks, and there are a number of operators that have been created by the Airflow community. And these are some of them. So we have the copy into operator, which is if you wanted to run a task on one of your DAGs to copy data into a table. You have the repos create operator, delete operator, and update operators. So these are in case you want to manage your CI/CD as part of an Airflow DAG. Then we have the Databricks run now operator, which actually triggers a run of an existing Databricks job or workflow via the API. And we're going to dive into, this is one of the operators that we're going to dive deeply into today. And then we have the run now deferrable operator, which is just a deferrable version of the previous operator that we talked about. The Databricks SQL operator is just running a SQL query on a Databricks endpoint, on a SQL endpoint or warehouse, or on a Databricks cluster. And then we have the Databricks submit run operator, which is the other one that we're going to dive much deeper into today as well, and the deferrable version of it as well. So I've added links to each one of the operators here in case you want to go and dive into the documentation for each one of them on the Airflow side. And I'm sure we're going to make these little deck available to you after the webinar. So we've done a little bit of the presentation. So let's start talking about how do we connect all of these together. So let me stop sharing these, and I want to share my entire screen. I'm going to stop these. All right. Okay. So once you have, in this case, I have Airflow running on my local machine. So let me show you my terminal. So it's this one here. But once you have it up and running, if you see here, it's running on localhost. So from here, the way you would set it up so that you connect it to Databricks, the first thing that you want to do is you go into admin, you go into connections, And there's, in this case, there's the Databricks default connection that comes out of the box with Airflow. So you would go and edit that. And in here, you want to add the host of your Databricks workspace that you want to be executing jobs in. And then you have the option of either logging in via a username and password, or what is the more secure way and the preferred way, using a token. So in order to generate your token, let me go back to my workspace here. If you go into your user settings, and if you go to access tokens, you can create a new token, give it a name. So for example, Airflow demo. And that would give you a token ID that you would copy, and you can see that again. And you would put that into your Airflow instance. So if we go back to the Airflow UI, so let me go back. Maybe it'll be better if I just shared the single window. Give me a second. Sorry about that. I don't want to make you dizzy jumping around. I'm going here. Okay, so going back in here. So now I have one Databricks connection going to this workspace. Notice that there's no HTTPS at the beginning, no trailing workspace identifiers at the end. Is just the host. So we are going to save that. Actually, I'm not going to save it because I didn't change the token. And then in my case, I'm going to show you one of the DAGs that I want to show you is executing jobs in different workspaces. So I needed a secondary workspace connection, which is this one that you see down here. So it's the same story. So you would go. So actually, in this case, what I did is I added a new record. You want to make sure that you select the connection type is Databricks. And you want to change the login to be token and paste in that token that I showed you, you generate from the Databricks side. Okay, so once that we have that up and running, it means that, I remember now why I wanted to share the whole screen, because I wanted to share code with you now. So let me, bear with me for a second. I wanted to show you these. Okay, so what I have here are my Airflow DAGs that I've put together into a repo. You can choose to just have them out as a text file. It's not very picky about how you define your DAGs, but I found that this is the easiest way for me, at least. So right now I've created two DAGs, one for diving into the run now operator, and I have some examples there, and then another DAG where we're going to talk about the run submit operator. So as a reminder, the run now will trigger a job that already exists on the Databricks side, on the Databricks workspace, and the run submit will create an ephemeral job run, and we'll see what that looks like in a second when I start them. But I wanted to show you the code. I've kept it really, really simple, just so that I can walk you through step by step what's going on at each line. So why don't we go ahead and start with the run now examples. So if we go back to our, sorry, I did it again. I didn't share my desktop. There. So if we go back here, so we have the run now DAG at the top. So we can do, if we go into the DAG, if we look at the graph, we'll see right now all the nodes in my DAG are not connected, they're not dependent. to each other. But of course, you can create the actual dependencies for your actual use case. But in my case, you'll see that we have the run existing jar job here, existing repo job, and run workflow. So let's start by looking at this first job, which actually you might want to, there, that might be easier to see. Okay, so if you see here, this task in the DAG is running. We've given it a task ID, and we've given it a Databricks connection ID. We've specified the job ID that we want to run, and we just say that this is part of this DAG that we created up here. If we go and we look into that, into the workspace that's part of that connection ID that we have here, it's this one, and I know that it's this job here. So if you see this number, this job ID, it's this job ID that's here. And what this job does, because remember, these are jobs that are already defined on Databricks that we're going to run from Airflow. So if we look at this job right now is running a notebook that is part of a Databricks repo. So it's backed by GitHub. So let's look at the configuration of that first. So it's a notebook. It's connected to, we're saying that we want to connect to this repository, which is on GitHub. We want to run the main branch. And this is an important call out, because something that I want to make sure that I talk about and open up for questions at the end is that if you are starting out with Airflow, it's a good idea to start thinking about your CI/CD and your best practices for running your staging environment, development, etc. So this is one good way of doing that, because you could have on this particular workspace, you could have a job that runs the staging branch or release number X. As you can see here, you can run different tags. So you could run a specific tag for your GitHub code, or a specific branch for your staging code, etc. And you don't have to change. You could keep the code the same, and replicate the Airflow DAG so that it connects during your staging step. It connects to the staging jobs, etc. And this is one way of doing it. So in this case, I want to run the main branch because this is supposedly my production job. And then within that, I know that this is one of the repositories that I have. Let me pin this so that it's easier to see. This is that repository. And I see that within the repository, I have notebooks, and then this is the notebook that we're interested in running. And you can see that we've specified the path from our repository here. So what this will allow you to do is that you will use these Databricks repos to make changes, create branches, etc., to your notebooks. And then from the job, you can run the specified branch from GitHub directly. Okay, so back to Airflow. So we have the job definition. In this case, I am running this job on an automated job cluster. So if we look at the definition, there's nothing special to it. It's a very small cluster because, again, it's a very small job. So it's a single node job. It's a single node cluster. And that's pretty much all there is to it. So that is the first task of our DAG, is to run this job on this workspace. The second task on this DAG is running an existing jar job on a different workspace. So if we go to the other workspace, we'll see that here. If you look at this number, again, the job ID, it's this job ID. And what this job does is that it will run a jar that right now I have out in S3. Again, this is another capability for you to shape your CI/CD pipeline around, because you could have, if you need to package your code, if you're developing in Scala, probably what you want to do is you want to compile your code and package it and put it on a path. In this case, I chose S3. You could also choose DBFS. But in this case, so I have it on S3. You could have your code being, your jar being published to S3. Then your job in Databricks points to that location of the latest jars on S3. And then Airflow triggers the job, and the job goes, fetches the latest jar, attaches it to the cluster, and runs. Okay, so this is a very simplistic jar. I'll show you the code, but there's it's very, very small. So if we look at what it's doing here, all that's happening in this tiny jar is that we're reading the number of teams, football teams that we have on this table, and we're printing that number out. Again, very simplistic. I just wanted to show you the flow. So, so that's all there is to this job. And then for the last job that we have here is running a workflow. So if we go back to our jobs, it's this job here. We go to tasks. Remember how I mentioned on Databricks, you could have the workflow containing multiple job tasks, and then from Airflow, you trigger that workflow on Databricks. So this workflow in particular, it has two tasks. One is running a notebook, the other one is running a jar. Both of them are running on the same automated job cluster, and they are not dependent on each other. So they both run at the same time. So if we look at the first one, this first task is running a simple notebook that is on my local repository. And when we look at the other one, no, that's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to go back to my tab. Sorry. Push the wrong button. Tasks. And if we look at the other one is doing what the other job was doing. So it's reading that jar from S3, attaching it to that automated job cluster and running. And there's nothing more to it. So if we go back to our DAG, so we have the repo job, right, reading from the main branch for our notebook. We have the existing jar job, and we have the workflow that is being run. So we can either trigger it here. Let's do that, and we can see it starting to run. If you see here, right, it's this green dot here. So we could go and take a peek at, so it's starting with this one. We can take a look at the log. Within the log, it will tell you the actual link to the run that's going on at the moment. So if there is an error, you will find it here. You can also find it here. There's a button. When you click on the actual task, it will give you a link to the Databricks job run as well. So if you click on that, it will take you to the workspace. Right. And you'll see that the cluster is starting here, and it's trying to execute the notebook from our repository. So we'll let that run, but while it runs, I can show you the previous runs that I did in preparations for showing you this one. So, for example, we could go in here. We can take a look at that one. And yeah, you can, from here, you can choose to, if there is an error that you had to fix on the Databricks side for this particular task, you could go make the changes, and you could choose to rerun this particular task and not the entire DAG. Okay, so that is pretty much all I had for the run now examples. Carrie, do we have any questions thus far that we can take for the run now operator?
Nope, we don't have anything in the Q&A or the chat. So everyone, if you do have questions, put them in there and we'll make sure we get them answered.
Awesome. Okay. So then we can start talking about the runs submit DAG. So run submit. Let's look at the code first. Let me make it a little bit bigger. Okay, so I don't want you to look at Airflow right now, so let me cover that. So if we look at the definition of our DAG in this case, so we are defining all the cluster specs that we're interested in. In this case, I only want a single node cluster because, again, my job is very small. I add the AWS attributes and my actual VM specifications. And then there are two examples that I wanted to show you today. So the first one is running, is simply running a jar on Databricks without having to specify a job beforehand on the Databricks side. So what this run submit, the submit run operator will do is it will take your executable code with a definition of a compute mechanism, and it will run that code on that cluster.
Really quick, you just mentioned it, but can you go into what the Databricks con ID is?
Yes, sorry about that. Yeah, so these are the ones we defined on the admin. So if we go into the admin as part of our setup, if we go into connections, there's these two connections that we set up. And these are, if you look here, that's the connection ID. So we have Databricks default, pointing to fieldeng.cloud.databricks.com, and we have the demo workspace connection pointing to demo.cloud.databricks.com. So when you specify this one, essentially tells us which workspace we want to target this task to. So this one, actually both of these are going to be executed on the field engineering workspace. But if we look back at the previous DAG that I was showing before, this first task is running against the demo workspace. Any other questions, Karen?
Nope, no follow-ups yet. Sounds good.
Okay. Okay, so we were talking about the cluster definition. Okay, so in this case, I want to use the same cluster definition for both of my tasks. So I've put it outside of the task definition so that I don't have to type all of that again. Well, copy paste all of that again. So we have all of our cluster definition at the top, and then we have both of our tasks. If you see here, they both use that definition. So when you look at, let's unpack this first one that we have here. So we have the task ID, which is what you will see in the UI. So if we go to the DAG and we find the name of our DAG, so we gave it a name here at the top, Databricks run submit DAG. It's going to that. So this task ID shows here. Nope, it's here. It's this one. And then we're saying we're going to run it on this on the workspace specified by this connection. And in this case, I'm going to be running that jar that I have on S3. So my main class is called main. I don't have any modules because, again, this is very small. And then I specify that my jar lives in S3. Again, this could be an ADLS path. It could be a DBFS path, or it could actually be a library that you create on Databricks as well. But anyways, you specify the path. You give it the cluster specifications. In this case, the ones that we created up here, and we say that it belongs to this tag. that's the first task that we're going to be running. The second task that we're going to run, is going to run an existing notebook in our workspace that is expecting a parameter. So let me show you that notebook first. So if we go here, again, it's a very straightforward notebook. So if we look at this notebook, it's expecting a parameter, and the parameter, the ID of that parameter is date, and we retrieve the value of that. We do some manipulation to filter out and make sure that we're getting the correct type, that we're not getting garbage passed in. Then we filter our table and we print out the count of games that fell on that parameter date that was passed in. And that's all we do. So this is the notebook. From the Airflow side, we want to say that we're going to run the notebook found on this path. So if you see that path, if you hover over the name of the notebook, you can see the path is right here, and you can copy it, and you would put it here. And then on their base parameters, here is where you would pass in the actual parameter that you want to pass. So again, we said the ID of the parameter is date, right? Because it's what we specified here. And we're passing, right now I'm passing in a hard-coded value. Again, this is meant to be an example, but at the end of the day, this is a Python file. So you can compute the actual value that you want to pass in. This can be an XCOM variable coming from a different DAG. I'm not going to go into those today. But this could be, it doesn't have to be a static value. You can pass in something smarter here. So today we're passing in that to our notebook, and yeah, that's all of our second task. So if we go back to Airflow, we can trigger this, and what we'll see is that, let's give it a minute for it to pick up. Sorry, because I'm running on my laptop, it's usually a little bit slower than it would be if it had a some machine dedicated for running just Airflow. So things are a little bit slow to refresh at times. Like, please, you're not running anymore. You're done. I saw you. Oh, you are running. Never mind. Let's see why it's still running. Okay. Okay, so in the previous one, it took about 6 minutes. So right now we see that both tasks on the workflow are running. And let's see if our other DAG, oh, where did it go? Let's see if our other DAG started running. Not yet, because again, because it's my because it's running on my local machine, it's optimizing for resources, and it only runs a single DAG at a time. But what we could do is we could look at a previous run that I had for this DAG. So if we go back one, yes, okay. So let's look at the first task that we have here, which was the ephemeral jar task. So if we click on that and we see the job run, we see that, so all we have on the Databricks side is a job run. There's no job, there's no permanent job attached to this run. So there's nothing to be found on the UI if you go under jobs. right? These are just the jobs that we've defined. It would be a job run here. So we see that the first task in the DAG was picked up and it's being run. Okay, so while we wait for these two to complete, any questions on run submit run, sorry.
So nothing showing up in the chat yet. So no questions yet.
Okay, so now our first DAG is done. So as you see, there's nothing running, which is what you would see here. So if we go and we take a look, we see the last run, and we see that all three were successful. And again, you could click on each one of the job runs, and it would take you to the specific job. So we will do that just for the difference between the two. That's still going. Oh, so that was the run. Never mind. So here we see this is the job that was run from Databricks as part of the previous DAG that we ran. There are pros and cons for both approaches. One thing that I really like about running a job that's already specified on the Databricks side is that you can see the history of all the runs on the Databricks side as well. So you can click into each one of the runs that were part of that job that were triggered by Airflow. But you would still see them here via the UI. So and I find I find it easier to navigate than going through the history on the actual DAG for each one of the nodes of the DAG. So yeah, and then for the other DAG, that one is going to take a little bit longer because again, this one is not running a persistent job. This is creating an ephemeral cluster, and it's just submitting the run, and that's it. Let's take a look. So it looks like our ephemeral jar task is done. So we could take a look at the job run again. And again, we see our jar is very simplistic. So all it's doing is printing out the number of teams that we have on the Premier League. I don't even know if that's right. It might be an outdated table for all I know. But in this table, we have 23 teams, and that's what we're printing. And this was successful. And now it has moved on to, it has not started. Should have started. It started. Okay. Took a while for the UI to refresh. Yeah, so that's pretty much everything I wanted to talk to you about today. I wanted you to see how you can connect the Airflow instance to different Databricks workspaces. How can you submit the different types of workflows and job types that are available in Databricks, giving you some hints around how to shape up your CI/CD best practices, your software development lifecycle, and the different steps that you take within it. So any questions as you think of applying this to your own workflows?
And we do have, some extra time. So if anyone has a detailed question, we can always bring you on to ask. We can unmute you so you can ask in person instead of typing.
Yeah.
Well, it was a great demo. So I think you might have actually done that great of a demo, and that's why we don't have a lot of questions.
Maybe I kept it too simple. I don't know.
But Just so everyone knows, the recording and the slides will be sent out after the meeting. And we did get another question. How can you run a job at a specific time each day in Airflow?
Okay, so Airflow has, you mean the scheduling of the actual job on Airflow?
Yep.
Right. So that is when you're creating your DAG. When you're creating your DAG, right now, I don't have these tasks scheduled, but it would be part of the definition here at the very top. So here, you would specify the interval, and this is a cron syntax that you would put in at which time you want to execute. And there's a variable that is associated to that execution time that is called DS that you can pass into your the jobs that you actually run.
Okay, sounds like that answered the question. Okay, so like I was saying, the recording and the slide deck will be sent out after the call ends. I'm not sure how long it'll take, but it'll be pretty quickly. And then you can always contact your account team if you have any other questions, or send an email out to us at Databricks.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody, for attending today. And yeah, best of luck. Enjoy coding.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good afternoon or rest of your day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.